In our podcast, Hearing the Unheard Stories of Transformation, we discuss a variety of sensitive subjects such as suicide, suicidal ideation, self harm, abuse, and faith crisis. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome to our podcast, Hearing the Unheard Stories of Transformation, presented by Pause Wellness. I'm your host, Eric Stauffer, and our guest again today is my sister, Jill Dickey. Hi, Jill.
Hi, Eric, and hi, everybody.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm excited for our conversation today. I think it's going to be a good
Awesome.
one. hmm
What are we talking about today?
Well, if you remember last week or last time on our podcast, we talked about differentiation, the developmental reality of differentiation. And if you haven't listened to that one, I highly recommend going back and listening to that. And we discussed in that podcast a few skills that we can build and work on to help us be more differentiated individuals. And two of those skills revolve around emotion regulation, emotional understanding, and emotional regulation. And so I think you and I agreed that we would spend a session talking about this really important topic because there's a lot to say about human emotion.
Yes. So, how human emotion and its interaction with differentiation in our relationships.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. So, which you said there's two.
The first skill is to know who you are. Okay. And we can do another podcast on that one too. But the number two and number three of the skills, if you go back and listen, are being able to be aware of and understand and regulate your emotions. And the third one is to control reactivity. And so those two are tightly linked. And what I think helps people develop those two really important differentiation skills is an understanding of emotion. We're gonna hopefully in this podcast raise people's IQ around the science and understanding of human emotion.
Because so often we're just experiencing emotion and not understanding it. We're just reacting to it.
Yeah.
But if we can increase our education on emotion, then we can leverage it for our good.
Yes. And there is a lot of scientific study and literature on emotion. And so we could
Awesome.
spend episode after episode talking about this. So this is again going to be it's a limited conversation on this podcast. And so this is going to be a sort of primer and we're going to do our best job to give you a broad overview. And then of course, I'll offer resources if you want to take a deeper dive.
Oh, that's great. Okay, take me through that.
Okay, so first of all, we've got to understand what emotions are. Okay. I think if we're all going to say, "Hey, I know what feelings are." But let's broaden this definition of what emotion is. Emotions are embodied reactions or responses to signals from the outside world. So for instance, let's say you're at a sporting event and your team that you love and has been following your whole life wins. What are you feeling?
Excitement, joy. Most of the teams I root for have not experienced that too much. So, but I know that the
Pretend in
counter
your
emotion,
fantasy life, your
yeah,
team has won the Super Bowl or something. Okay.
yeah, I have
So
experienced that, and that was elation.
elation is a great word. I love that. Okay. I recently lost my beloved pet, Winnie, my dog, that I had for 16 years. We lost her about 6 months ago. And the embodied experience I had was grief
Yeah,
and sadness and longing, right?
which
And I don't know.
I would anticipate in a extreme way when it's Bella's turn to go, our dog.
Yeah,
Yeah,
don't look forward to that, Eric.
no,
And I don't know, have you ever had a job interview or something that you really were,
anxious,
yeah.
nerves,
hmm
not
Okay.
hoping that it all goes well, not knowing what to expect, fear of anticipation.
Yes, I think we can all relate to the embodied experience of anxiety and nervousness. Butterflies in the stomach, sweaty
Yeah,
palms. I have a little bit of that right now, because this is a big
yeah.
topic to talk about.
Digestive system
Mhm.
issues.
Exactly, exactly. Emotions can be important and valuable resources of information and feedback about the world around us. And our emotions make us human,
Mhm.
very much so. They can help us survive and even thrive in the world. And they can also be unpredictable and challenging. Would you agree or disagree?
Yeah, sometimes an emotion can catch me off guard, even though I feel like I know myself really well.
Mhm.
Um, which sometimes is kind of demonstrating some part about me that I am not paying attention to.
Mhm. Yep. And we're going to learn today together how to pay more attention in the right way if we can. So as we know, if we think about the range of emotions we have each had as human beings, we know that we're wired up to experience both positive and negative emotions. And as human beings, it makes sense that we, the positive emotions are nice and pleasant and really nice to feel. And so we will almost automatically seek experiences that will bring more positive emotion. And then we'll also maybe try to avoid or minimize experiences that create negative emotion. So, for instance, like for years, I wasn't very good at getting regular checkups at the dentist because going to the dentist makes me really nervous and it used to scare me. And so I would avoid going to the dentist. And then when I would go to the dentist, I would end up having more work to do because I hadn't gone regularly.
So, kind of like if I'm afraid of being upset or angry or being afraid of sadness and like I'm going to cry, then I'm going to avoid scenarios that might cause me to feel those emotions, which can't always be really positive. If you're avoiding
Mm.
emotion just for the sake of avoiding emotion.
Yeah. And as always, you're leading me right into this next part, what we need to talk about. You're so good at this, Eric.
It's what I do, it's what I do best. And it's not even scripted. It's just natural.
Well, as human beings, we're all trying to cope with this world of emotion, kind of this changing landscape that we're all experiencing day to day, right? And it's hard, it can be difficult to cope with emotion. And so there's a few ways that we do this. And I'm going to talk about, I love this word because we're using it a lot, maladaptive ways to cope with negative emotions, or maybe even
Mal,
sometimes positive ones. All right.
mal meaning bad.
Maladaptive, bad, that's harsh, but just maybe not accruing to our, I don't know how to say it, not as adaptive. There you go.
Right.
Okay.
Not as healthy.
Yeah, not as healthy. So let's look at the three ways that I thought of, and maybe there's more that you can think of, but these are the three categories that I see a lot in my clients when they're
Okay.
working with me with emotions. We, sometimes we can let our emotions get the better of us. All right. And we can follow these emotions towards behavior that isn't good for us. They kind of overwhelm us and swamp us and then pull us toward behavior and actions that don't accrue to our benefit. So that's one way. Another way that we can struggle with emotions is sometimes we can get caught in the trap of spending all our time trying to correct or control our emotions, which can cause us to obsess unproductively on them. Have you ever experienced that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, you bet.
Okay.
I do not like to feel responsible for bad things or guilt.
Mm.
Shame, of course, but shame's maybe a different discussion. But
Oh, it's
yeah,
definitely
so
a feeling. Yeah.
I can get very obsessive or compulsive in making sure that I haven't upset someone to the point where they're probably bugged by my apologies.
Okay. So you have experienced that. The other way that we sometimes maladaptively cope with emotions is we can spend a lot of time and energy trying to suppress emotions. So the first one is trying to control, right? Control our emotional state. And the other one is to suppress it so that we don't have to experience them at all.
Bury
And
our head in the sand, so to speak,
yeah,
as to
yeah.
what
And in
that
this, we can
is.
develop behaviors anywhere from constant busy work, staying constantly in motion so we don't have to feel, or maybe even some self-soothing addictions that we go to numb out so we don't have to feel our emotions. And then
Food.
even this one, this might be not one that you thought about, but even too much positivity that
Yeah.
creates the tendency to bypass emotions we need to experience and feel and kind of move through.
So that kind of goes back to what we were saying a week or two ago about we got this spectrum, right? And it's not the antithesis of sadness isn't necessarily like toxic positivity because maybe it's just healthy management of emotion.
Yes, and I don't want to, positivity is a good thing, and I'm not against thinking positively, but if you are doing that constantly in an effort to
Avoid.
bypass or push away feelings that need to be experienced and moved through and understood, then it can be challenging.
I've noticed this in certain individuals in my life, and maybe I have it too at some point, but it can come across as, and I don't mean this to sound judgmental, but as disingenuine, like almost like like we're not being intentional in our communication. It's almost robotic response
Hmm.
because they're just wanting it to be so positive.
Hmm.
And I don't know. Does that make
It could
sense?
be. I mean, it could be happening. This is a challenging one because some social circumstances, it's not the best place to air out your emotions and talk about,
Right.
so sometimes we might not be completely honest or forthright with what we're exactly feeling because the context isn't right for that.
Right.
And so that's okay. That's not maladaptive in any way. But if we're never allowing ourselves to experience negative emotion and just moving to that, quote unquote, toxic positivity that you're talking about, it can be
Right.
challenging. So we have those three categories. We've got either, our emotion, like letting our emotions, we run away with those emotions and engage in behaviors that aren't good for us. The second one is to try and control them.
Control them.
Hmm. And the third one is to suppress them.
Press.
Hmm.
Okay.
So, and I'm always going to say this, you know me by now. I'm going to say that all of these ways of coping with emotion are very human, and we all do them. I can relate hardcore to all three of these things. All right. And so it's very human to do these things, but if we do them too much and we don't learn to work with our emotions in healthier ways, it can be problematic.
See, that's such an important reminder, Jill, and I don't mean to create a segue here, but I think maybe it comes back to like the way that we go through education where we think, okay, we either get an A on this or we get an F on this. And so we're just kind of ranking ourselves. So when we hear information on mental health and we hear, okay, maladaptive, that means these things are really bad. So I need to
Never do
figure out what
them.
is the opposite of that and go and do the opposite so that I can get an A on this project
Hmm.
rather than fail the way I've been failing. And you're really good at kind of reminding us, hey, take a practical approach to growth in these areas.
Yeah, I think that's not a segue. I think that's a really important point. Is that learning to work with emotions in healthier ways is a skill and it's a process.
Yeah,
And we're
you're
not going
not
to get it
giving us
right
an
all the
F.
time.
Yeah,
No,
sorry. You're not giving us an F in diagnosis. You're
no.
giving an awareness to diagnosis so
Hmm.
that we know what to do from where we are.
Yeah. So, as I'm telling you these three more maladaptive ways to work to deal with emotion, I can relate to every single one of them. And,
Me too.
I work with this stuff all day and I still fall into these categories and it's okay.
I know
I
you did that to me recently. No, just kidding.
It's true,
I
I
did it
did.
to you.
Yeah, it's true. So, I like to think of our experience as a practice, an opportunity to practice. But what we're going to talk about now is okay, so if we find ourselves in one of these three categories or all three of these categories, what do we do? How do we get better at this? What do we need to learn and understand that can help us learn to ride the wave of emotion in healthier ways as human beings? Because emotions are always going to be with us.
Yeah,
We're emotional creatures.
it is a human
Mhm.
experience.
Yes. So, what we need to do is, I'm going to break this up into three things. The first one is to become more aware of your emotions. So, we're going to raise awareness. The second is to learn to accept and make peace with your emotions, especially the more negative ones. I don't know. I don't have to make a lot of peace with my positive emotions, but negative
Right.
emotions are a different story.
But we might
Although
have to
every
make
once in a
peace.
while. if I get too happy, I think, oh, I'm too happy. Something bad's
Yeah.
going to happen.
Yeah.
So sometimes
Yeah.
that can be a problem.
But making
Uh,
peace with things like anger or sadness
yes.
or sexuality, even
Yes.
in
Sexual
some ways.
feelings and emotions.
Sexual
Yes.
feelings, that's right. Yeah.
Yes. They all, those are all things that are common to human beings. And if we can make more peace with the experience of them, we tend to do better.
Right.
And this awareness and this accepting leads to what has been coined in the biz as emotional agility or emotional flexibility. And that's what we want to try to build in us is this ability to be more agile and flexible with our emotions. So
I
that we
like
can
that.
kind of move through this landscape of human emotion in a more healthy way.
Awesome.
Okay. So like I said, the first one is awareness. Okay. And what that includes is, do I recognize my emotions when I'm feeling them? Do I understand where they're coming from? And do I understand that all emotions are welcome?
Mm.
And you'd be surprised how many people don't understand that. They've got a list of emotions that are acceptable and a list of emotions that are unacceptable.
Yes, let me just, I think about that a lot. And yeah, I think it's I mean, I don't mean to boil this all down to religious response,
Mhm.
but so often our emotions are attached to behaviors or something like that in our religious living or my faith background that I think, okay, if I experience this emotion, that means it's attached to behavior that I shouldn't be exhibiting. Therefore, I'm sinful. So the emotion lets me know that I'm a sinful person. So I've got
Mhm.
to avoid the emotion because that means I'm avoiding the behavior that leads to that emotion. I don't know if that's
Yes.
going to make sense to our listeners, but that's where I default to. When I sit there and I think emotions I'm trying to avoid, I'm usually defining myself as worthy or not to
Oh,
have
yeah.
those
I think people
emotions.
do this a lot. For instance, let's give an example. God doesn't like me to be angry,
Right,
right? God's against the feeling of anger. And so if I feel angry, then I've done something wrong.
right.
And, what I want to say to that is I get it. It's very human. I've done it myself quite a bit. But what I want to say to that is kind of good luck.
Right.
Try being human and never feeling angry.
And maybe direction that we've received from religious leaders is not talking about an emotional experience of humanity, but
Hmm.
talking more about maladaptive responses to that human emotion. So
Eric, you
the
did it
warning
again.
against anger is to not do things you shouldn't do with that anger.
Right. So you led me right there again. See, you're just so good at this
Yep,
because,
that's what.
in social society and in our efforts to live well, all behaviors in response to emotions are not always welcome,
Yeah.
right? So learning to process and regulate emotion is an important skill. So, we're talking about anger. Anger is a good one to think about here. Is it okay that I'm experiencing anger? It is very human, but I can't just go smack the person I'm angry with.
Right.
That's not a pro-social behavior. It's not going to work in the society in which I live. And so it matters how I respond to my anger. It
Yeah.
doesn't make me a bad person to be feeling angry. That's human. But how I process and manage and regulate that emotion and then what I do in response to it can matter quite a bit.
It's almost like oftentimes we differentiate between conflict and contention. So
Hmm.
conflict is naturally occurring circumstances for everyone, whereas contention is hatred and enmity because of the conflict that we feel.
Hmm.
And we don't necessarily have to go, I mean, we can have anger, we can have response, but it doesn't mean we have to exhibit it in hateful,
Treatment
vengeful.
of
Yep.
others. Yes,
Yes.
exactly. And you can even work with your feelings of anger so you feel it less often if you tend to be a really angry person. You can, kind of,
Anger management.
yeah, anger management. But there are some people who need to experience anger more. They've repressed it so much
Yeah.
and haven't let themselves experience anger, and that can also be problematic.
That reminds me of, have you seen A Monster Calls? That
Yes. It's
or
been
read
a
the
while, but
book.
I've read the book and watched the movie. Yeah.
Yeah, there's that moment where this young boy has repressed all these pains because of his parents' divorce and his mother's cancer and all those things, and his mother says to him, if you need to break things, you break them.
Hmm.
You break those dishes, you break whatever you need to break if you need to get those feelings going. In a, obviously that's not an encouragement of negative behavior necessarily. It's just that isolating that principle that sometimes we need to express these things in order for it to be more healthy for us.
Right. And learning how to express them in healthy ways is part of this.
Yeah.
It's like, how do I express? I really need to express these emotions. I want to express these emotions. What's the best way to do that?
Yeah,
Right?
we've
And
we've
maybe
thought about creating a business where you just get old used dishes in a room where you can just
they
smash dishes.
there is a business like that.
There
You
is.
can do that. You can go and break things in a room. You can pay to do that.
See,
Yeah,
a healthy expression of anger
maybe. Yeah, it could
in a
be.
safe, controlled
I
environment.
isn't the takeaway from that story just that this little boy wasn't allowing himself to feel normal
Yes.
human things in the face of his challenges, and
Yep.
he, through the course of the story, learns to let those emotions come
Yep.
forward. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Because
So
he
that's
was
a good.
assuming he was so bad for feeling, and he did
Yes.
not want to face the true emotions of what
Yeah, I
he
remember
had.
that. I
Spoiler
remember
alert.
that. Speaking of emotions, I remember that movie making me very emotional. It
Oh,
was a really
so
touching film.
emotional. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
so good.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one, we got awareness. Now we have acceptance. Okay. Do I accept? We kind of talked about this a little bit. Am I accepting that our emotions are okay to feel? I kind of like to talk to clients about like this. All emotions are welcome on my bus, but not all emotions are welcome to drive my bus. Okay. But
Yes.
they get to stay on the bus. I don't get to kick them off because that would be maladaptive to say, I can never feel this. Okay. So they get to ride along in my bus, but it matters who has the steering wheel.
I recently heard an interview of a popular therapist, and it was Jay Shetty was interviewing them, and he said, what's the best advice you've ever heard on parenting? And she said, all emotions are welcome, all behaviors are not.
Yes. I saw a cute little girl on Instagram saying that.
Yeah.
Just a tiny little, I'm like, wow, she's learning emotional intelligence from a young age.
Oh, that's great.
Okay, so the next one, the third one is this building this agility and this flexibility. Okay, emotional ability is the skill we can develop that allows us to be in the moment with whatever emotions we're experiencing while changing or maintaining behavior to align with your deepest intentions or values.
Yeah.
Okay, and so we're gonna talk about how to start building that skill, and the resources I'm going to give you are really good resources for diving deeper into this
So
idea.
I just want to point out, because I think it might be important for our listeners to recognize that means you can maintain your virtues and your values and your life goals. And although you're learning to navigate the emotions that you have, you can find a way to have them work together. You don't
Yes,
have to divorce yourself from your priorities just as you're
yes.
learning how to be more healthy with your emotions.
Exactly. To live life well is to have those things go hand in hand. That ability
Yes.
to feel and experience humanity, and then also to make informed choices and wise choices about your behaviors and actions. So there's a quote that I think maybe a lot of listeners might be familiar with. If you've read Man's Search for Meaning,
Oh
this
yeah.
is Viktor
Viktor Frankl.
Frankl who wrote this. He's a psychologist who was in the concentration camps during World War II. And he wrote this beautiful book. If you have not read it, it's an older book, but it's a beautiful book about human agency and choice. And he makes this really profound statement in the book. And he says, between stimulus, so the incoming information, and response, how
There's
we
a
respond
space.
to that, there is a space. And our power to choose, uh, let's see, let me read it exactly because I'm going to blow it if I don't. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom.
And if I remember correctly, was he in Auschwitz? Is that where he
I
was?
can't remember. I don't want to
He
say
was
because
in
I
one
don't
of the
remember, but
concentration
it could be
camps. And
Auschwitz. Yeah.
but yeah, that I remember him saying something like, they took everything from me. They took my family. They took my possessions. They took my clothing. They took my hair. What I
Yeah.
learned is that they could not take how I was going to respond internally in that space between stimulus and response.
Exactly. So
It's
he
it was
kind
the
of
one
figured this
place
out.
he maintained his power
Yeah.
was in that spot.
Yeah, and it's really profound when we can figure out how to do that better. And again, I'm always going to remind us this is a process. Sometimes we're going to really nail it, and other times we're going to just really mess it up. And that's okay because we have this beautiful thing called repair and a chance to try again. So, it's
Yeah,
okay.
because when I stub my toe, the stimulus and my response, the word that comes out of my mouth is it happens so fast. It
It
doesn't
really
feel like
does.
there's a space there.
Well, he doesn't say the space is big, okay?
Oh
But
yeah.
but there is a way we can create more space. And so, I want to make this really concrete. I want our listeners to be able to take away a process that they can actually practice in real time.
Right.
And so, is it okay if I share with you what I do with my clients to help them as they're learning to do
I guess
this?
so. I guess
Okay.
it's okay.
That's okay. It's fine. You can even
No, please
try
do.
it if you want to. Okay. So I'm going to mention a favorite therapist, psychologist, neurobiologist that you are aware of, but his name is Dan Siegel.
Right.
But before I say anything about him, we're going to go through this step by step process. There's five steps, six steps in this. And that may seem like a lot, but it's not. When you get good at this, it becomes kind of your natural way of being.
Right.
Okay, so here's step number one. I'm going to bring up Dan Siegel.
Okay.
So when I work with my clients, I say, okay, first of all, what we're going to do when we're feeling a difficult emotion and we want to work with it better, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to name it. What is the emotion I'm feeling? So Dan Siegel has this little phrase, it's called name it to tame it. And he talks about this ability to be able to use vocabulary to describe the feeling that you're feeling. And the more vocabulary you have, the better. There's been some research, I think Brene Brown did a little bit of this, where she had people talk about the emotions they feel. And she thought, oh, maybe they'll have 8 or 9 emotions that they can describe. Most people only had 3. Can you guess what they are?
Happy, sad, scared, or angry.
Mad. Happy,
Mad. Yeah.
sad, mad. Yes.
Yeah.
That was about the range of their vocabulary. So we want to develop a
Diversify
wider, broader vocabulary
more
of
vocabulary for our
emotions. Yes.
emotions,
So,
which
for
is
instance,
literally that's emotional intelligence, right? The
yes,
more we identify and diversify our emotions, the more we can work with them.
yes. And at the end, I'll give you an app that is so good at helping people do this. Okay.
Nice.
I'll share that with you. But for instance, let me give you an example. I'm peeved. I'm enraged.
Yeah.
Are those different?
Yes.
Vastly.
Yeah. You're bugging me, or
Mhm.
I'm going to kill you.
Yeah, exactly. So we
Yeah.
want to get better at really precisely doing the best we can at labeling the actual emotion. And this really does have an impact on the way you experience emotions. So I'm going to show you something for those who are like looking at the screen. If you're watching YouTube, this is a pillow that I have in my office that shows the wheel of emotion. And in the middle, it's got sad, mad, scared, joyful, powerful, and peaceful. And then as it branches out here, it's all these other words to describe those emotions. So this is a pillow that I just let my clients look at and hold when they're trying to describe their emotions. But you can just Google wheel of emotion and it will come up. And I suggest that people go look that up and maybe print one out and just study it.
We should make some pause pillows with the wheel of emotion on
You
them.
could. It's a great tool. When I
Get your
discovered
merch
it,
today. Get your merch.
get your merch. Yes, exactly. So we've got name it to tame it. That's step number one. So get better at that vocabulary. Step number two, this is an interesting one. The science to back this up. Okay. Locate the emotion in your body. There is a continuous feedback loop between body and mind. It's that body-mind connection. So locating the embodied response can help raise awareness around it. So, like I think about like a cartoonist drawing pictures of people experiencing life. How
Yes.
do they show you what the person that they're drawing is experiencing? It's
Thought bubbles.
You can totally tell. Well, just in the bot, like, if you
Yeah.
see it, no thought bubbles, just the
Oh, you're
cartoon
talking just like,
itself,
yeah, yeah, the expression on their face or
the way
like
that their body's being
little
held or
things around
something.
their head or so,
Mhm.
like When I
Mhm.
think of like Charlie Brown being frustrated, there's all these like dust particles or whatever.
Yes, emotion gets expressed through the body. So if
Yeah.
you can locate it in your body, oh, I feel it in my stomach, I feel it in my hands, I
Yeah.
feel it in my shoulders, then it can help you locate and be aware of the emotion and where it's sitting in your body.
Yeah.
So that's step number two.
Your brain is your body. I don't know why we always separate
Yeah,
that.
your brain is your body, and they are
If we're
intricately
having thoughts
connected.
and emotions, it is a
Mhm.
physical response that also
Yes,
manifests itself other elsewhere in the body.
sure does. So the greater awareness we can have about that body-mind connection, the more we're able to be aware of our emotions and to regulate them. Okay. So step number three is this is one of my favorites part of this process. So first we've named it as precisely as we can. We've located in the body. Now the third step is to put the emotion in context. And the way that I say this is to say connect the feeling with the reason for the feeling as much as you can. Now that's not always going to be possible because sometimes you're like, I'm feeling this thing and I don't know why. I can't figure that out right now, right? But one of the ways you can say this is this makes sense because I'm feeling angry and this, I'm feeling enraged or something. I'll use a more, I'm feeling enraged and this makes sense because.
It's like a self-diagnosis of the
Mhm.
emotion, like why I'm feeling this.
So why do you think I would want people to get better at kind of understanding the context of the emotion? This makes
Well,
sense because.
yeah, because then you're not just leaving it as this ethereal thing that's out there. You're actually starting to put it down on paper and grow with it.
Into the context of your life,
That's right.
right? And then right tightly connected to step three is step four, which is to normalize the experience. And what I'll say to myself is most people might experience something similar if they were in my shoes. And the reason I like clients to add this step is because oftentimes we'll do this judgment on the emotion, which is like, and I shouldn't feel that. Other people don't feel that. Now, I'm not saying everyone's going to feel the exact same thing you do in the exact same context. It might vary, but I think we've got a lot in common as human beings. And I think when things make us angry, they would probably make somebody else angry too.
Right.
And so it can help to normalize the emotional experience that this is what it is to be human.
Yeah.
And if
It's
if
not
other people had lost their dog, they'd feel really, really depressed and lonely too.
right. I think we again, this kind of comes back to the faith thing. We get so afraid to be okay with emotion because we think it's an excuse of maladaptive behaviors, which are not okay.
Hmm.
And that's not it. It's okay to be okay with our emotions
Hmm.
and know that it's not excusing maladaptive behaviors.
And it's okay to feel the,
Yes,
the the gamut of human experience.
that's right.
It really is. And so, okay, to just review, we're naming the emotion as precisely as we can, building a better vocabulary for describing what we're experiencing and what we're feeling, what emotions we're having. Number two, we're going to try to locate it in our body. Where are we experiencing this in an embodied way? Number three, put it in context. This makes sense because, and this, I just love watching clients do this. Oh, it does make sense that I would feel that. That's not weird.
Mhm.
And if I can join them, yeah, I'd feel probably very similar to you if I were having your experience. And that's where that normalizing comes from. Most, if not everyone, would feel maybe similar emotions if they were experiencing what I was experiencing.
Yeah.
So those are the first four steps to help you kind of gain awareness. Okay. We're going to work on this agility and flexibility. Okay. So it's okay. Now I've located, I'm aware of the emotion. I've accepted that it's okay to have it, but now what?
Right. What am I going to do?
Agility and flexibility is not about ignoring difficult emotions or thoughts. It's about holding those emotions and thoughts loosely and facing them courageously and compassionately, and then moving past them to make valued and intentional choices in your life. That's a lot. That was a mouthful.
But it makes sense to me. Like the imagery that comes to my mind is
Yeah.
a golf club Like a golf club, if we hold it too tightly and too rigidly, then we don't give any play into our swing. So then if we mess it up, we're really going to mess it up. But if we hold it a little more loosely, then the club can do its work and we give room for growth and adaptation.
Ooh, nice metaphor,
That's
golfer.
right.
I,
That's for
I
my
think you
golfer
just solved
listeners.
what's wrong with my golf game.
Yeah.
I can't golf at all.
Yeah.
There's a lot more wrong with my golf game than that, but it's a good metaphor. All right. So that agility and flexibility is that ability to hold thoughts and emotions, especially negative ones, kind of loosely and stay in touch with them, but be able to move through them and still make choices that align with our intentions and our values. So, step number 5 of this process is to find a value that matters to you. And just to review, values are basic and fundamental beliefs that guide or motivate attitudes and actions. So
So
we
the
could do
value within the context of the emotion that I felt, like why it
maybe,
was
I'm
there.
trying to think of a good example that we could give. Okay, I'm feeling really angry right now. I should be using a more sophisticated word, but for our intents purposes, I'm feeling really
Peeved.
peeved and
Yeah.
upset
Yeah.
right now. And what I want to do is go and get really angry with the person who is irritating me and who's doing something that I don't like. Okay, this goes back to our differentiation skill and why this is so important. So I'm going to go regulate because I've got to find a value. Okay, my value states that I respect others and I want to treat them with that respect, the respect that I would like to get back. So that means that if I'm going to let my values guide my decision, my values drive my bus and not the emotion of
Yes.
anger, then I'm going to align with my values and say, okay, how do I go and express my feelings and emotions, but in a way that lines up with what I value and what matters to me and who I want to be?
It's so interesting. I have a relative who experiences some pretty extreme emotions when there's conflict, and I've tried to help them see that uh, his his value is in loyalty. Like the motive that he has there is loyalty, which is a great thing to have,
Mhm.
loyalty to family. But it doesn't mean that it has to be expressed a specific way that
Mhm.
actually can end up burning bridges. So
Exactly.
lean into loyalty as a positive, but find more
Yes.
healthy ways to express
And
it.
what does my loyalty dictate that I do with these emotions?
Right.
And how I handle them. So this values part can be really tricky. So we could even do another podcast on values. That would be
Yeah,
a cool
for
thing to
sure.
do and help people discover what their values are because sometimes that's a hard part of the process. It's like, oh, I don't know. How does that line up with the value? In some instances, it might be really easy to do, and other times it might be a little more challenging. But step number 6 would be to take action. And what I mean by that is what is one thing that I can do, an action that I can take right now that lines up with the value, despite the difficult emotion I might be experiencing. And that's the process.
Yeah, I love that. So take action.
Okay, so now we have the 6, what is it, 5 steps, 6 steps. I don't even
Six
know my own.
steps.
I don't even know my own. Okay.
So
Let's
many
review the
lists.
6 steps, okay? Name it to tame it. Locate the emotion in your body. Get more aware of that mind-body connection. Put the emotion in context. This makes sense because, which is closely connected with step number 4, which is to normalize. It's okay to be feeling this. Most people would. Then the next one is to locate a value. And number 6 is to take an action that aligns with that value, even if the emotion still remains. What is an action that I can take that's in line with a value that's important to me?
I love it. That's all Dan Siegel, right?
Not all of it, just the name it to tame it.
Oh, name it to tame it is
This
Dan
is
Siegel.
taking different parts of emotional agility and putting together into a process.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah. So in light of what you just said, just okay, this is one way. This is one process that can help you become more emotionally aware, accepting, and flexible around it. To be able to, that's a one way to help hold those emotions loosely. There's a few other things that I encourage clients to do to help them get better at this emotional intelligence and this emotional agility. Can I just share a few really quick that
Yes.
people can
Yeah,
look
go
at?
ahead. You
Now,
bet.
nobody grown although we won't be able to hear anybody doing this, but you'll hear this all the time in psychology, but there's so much science to back this up. That
Or go ahead and groan because it's an emotion that you
we
might naturally
exactly go
experience.
ahead and groan and
Yeah.
don't say that word to me. Okay, meditation. I know it's totally cliche that I would say that, but the science is clear. The research is clear. People who incorporate a meditation practice are much more able to manage emotions to their benefit. And meditation does not have to be complex. I think we get this vision in our mind of like someone sitting in lotus position for 2 hours and,
Right.
connecting with the universe. But it can be very simple. And there's lots of resources online for simple meditation practices that if you do 5 or 10 minutes a day, can build up the neural pathways in your brain that can help you really around this skill of emotional regulation. Another thing that I like to do is a visualization. When I'm feeling intense emotion, especially if it's negative, I imagine I have a dial on I just put it on my belly because that's where I feel emotions quite a bit. And I can imagine myself turning that dial down, not all the way off. I'm not turning it off because I want to accept those emotions, but just turning them down a little bit to get a little quieter so that I can decide how to act.
Mm.
So just maybe can you just envision turning that dial down just enough that, like when a stereo is really loud and you can't think,
Right.
and if I could just turn that volume down just a little bit, maybe I can think through this.
Or like a Nest thermostat or something that
Yeah,
helps to
something like
control
that.
temperature.
Yeah, whatever you need to visualize that can help you keep that emotion there to give you the information you need, but not to take over.
Mhm.
So visualization can help. Another one is box breathing. Using breath work is a really good way to regulate intense emotions. So box breathing is, I breathe in for 4 counts, I breathe out for 4 counts, I breathe in for 4 counts, I breathe out for 4 counts. And I do that until I feel a little bit more regulated. There's something about the breath and paying attention to the breath that can calm you.
Mhm.
Um, Another one is to ground yourself in the present moment. Emotions tend to flood the system.
So is this kind of like mindfulness?
Kind of, yeah. So what I would do is something really concrete. This is a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is what I call it. So you're going to be
Yeah.
looking for 5 things in the room that you can see, 4 things you can touch or feel. 3 things. I'm trying to think of
You can hear,
oh yeah, hear and
smell.
taste and smell. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And that helps kind of ground you in the present moment so you can think more clearly.
Yeah.
Okay. Another practice that's lots of therapists will tell you, but also has tons of research, is to journal about your emotions. Write them down, process them on paper,
Yeah.
write about how you feel and why you feel it, and really get it out on paper. That can be helpful. And, I'm a verbal processor, so I like to find a trusted friend and talk through my feelings with a friend.
You're journaling to your friend.
Yeah. Some people really like to do it in private, and some people like to do it with people, whatever your preference.
You
Processing
know,
is
in
good.
today's world, Jill, where people are so worried about privacy and those kinds of things that they might be hesitant to journal because they're afraid of who might see something. Or how do I know if I'm typing this in my phone, it's not going to go on some cloud somewhere and come back to bite me?
Well, maybe don't do it
So,
on your phone. I don't
right.
know. It's up to you. I mean, if you don't feel safe doing that,
Well, I'm just the only reason I'm bringing that up is we want people to recognize, hey, we understand there may be hesitations with some of these things.
yeah,
So find an effective way to do it that you feel
yeah.
safe with.
Be creative with it.
Don't
Yeah,
throw it out just because you have hesitation with it.
yeah. And then the last one I would say is to practice expressing emotion in healthy ways. And the way that I like to think through it is to say, how can I speak for my emotion and not from it? As if my emotion were a personality and I wanted to speak for it.
It deserves the floor for
Yeah,
its
and how can
time.
I express that emotion in a healthy way and express it for sure, but express it in healthy ways. And that's a practice.
Oh, I love that.
Mm.
That's so good. So, do you have some resources you wanted to share with
Yeah, I
us
want to
about
share a
all
few
these things?
resources, and these are just a few to start, but there is a vast
Yeah.
library of literature on emotional intelligence and emotional ability and understanding emotions, but I'm going to give you 3 of my favorites. Okay. The first one is a book by Brene Brown called Atlas of the Heart. So if you're looking, you can see it here.
There's
This is
Brene.
a beautiful book that is like a primer on different emotions and what they mean and how they feel so that you can really understand the common emotions that human beings feel and experience.
Increases that vocabulary to
Yeah, it
study.
increases that vocabulary and just really helps you understand emotion and gain awareness there. So I really recommend that. My second recommendation is by Dr. Susan David. It's a book about emotional agility. This will really drive home what emotional agility and flexibility looks like. And it's a beautiful, easy to read book about that by Susan David. And she has a really good TED Talk if you want a quick
Awesome.
little overview of what this book is going to offer. And
Susan
then
David, is that what it was?
Susan David.
Okay.
And then the next book that I recommend is I don't have a hard copy of it, but I have it on Audible. It's called Permission to Feel by Mark with a C, Mark Brackett. And he talks about emotional intelligence and giving yourself permission to feel all the feels of being human and how to
How do you
handle
spell
it.
bracket? Just like,
Brackett.
so
Mark
two
Brackett.
T's.
Yeah,
Okay.
permission to feel. And those are my three favorites that are beginning resources. Mark Brackett is the one I told you I was going to share an app with you.
Oh,
Mark
yeah.
Brackett is the creator of this app. It's free. It's such a cool free resource. It's called How We Feel. And you can go download it for free. And it has daily check-ins for how you're feeling. And it will give you precise language for your feelings. It'll give you meditation. There's so many amazing things. If you're looking to increase your emotional awareness, your emotional intelligence, and your emotional flexibility, it's a great place to start.
And that's called How I Feel,
How We Feel.
How We Feel.
And it's a Mark Brackett and his team created the app. And
Mhm.
it's just a really fun way to engage with all of this information and to
If
get better at
only we were getting kickbacks for this, Jill. I
it.
mean,
Right?
yeah.
Where's Mark? He needs to,
Yeah.
although I
Come on,
think that
Mark.
he gets donors and people that give money so that he can keep this app going and
Oh, that's
make it
awesome.
free for people. So
Maybe
it's a
Brene will
really,
send us some kickback for
yeah,
Atlas of the
maybe.
Heart.
She probably doesn't need. There's so many good books out there with
Yeah,
her. She's just good at with the shame too, especially if you want to
yeah,
learn more about that. So those are my resources just off the top of my head. A good place to start.
that's great. Well, Jill, thanks so much for helping us with this. And obviously, to our listeners, we've got so much more to discuss, so much more out there to help us to get better at with our relationships and our emotions, improving our relationship with God, with ourselves, and so on. So, thank you, Jill. I love learning from you.
It's fun. Thanks for talking with me.
Okay, we'll catch you next time.
All right. Thanks, Eric. See
All
ya.
right, bye bye.
Bye.